So, Becoming Cousteau is the documentary on the life of Jacques Cousteau, who most people know for his underwater documentaries. Is greatly revered underwater documentaries about documenting sea life and the environmental sciences. And yeah, you do get a bit of footage from that, but you also get like kind of like a more encompassing view of his life in this documentary, which I really appreciated. You get to see the early days of his of his obsession with the sea, how he loved the idea of just going underwater and exploring stuff, and just going out on boats and just seeing what the underwater world has to offer. Now you got to understand, at the time there wasn't a lot of technology for like deep sea diving and stuff like that. There also wasn't a lot of work put into filming what's under the water too. So it's interesting how this came about because Jacques Cousteau just kind of like fell into this because he was obsessed with it. And it wasn't like he like initially set out like I'm gonna make I'm gonna explore underwater and like develop this camera for that. It just kind of happened just because he liked filming stuff. He would go out to sea with just like a whole bunch of people who just wanted to get away and just wanted to experience what it was like to be on the ocean and the sea for a long time. And yeah, he just filmed it while he was on the boat and just had like a blast doing it. And I think it's one of those things like it came natural to him. Like, he loves the sea, but he also loves like filming stuff too. Like, he'd just pick up a camera and go. So of course, like, he got to a point where he's like, oh well, maybe I should take this camera under the water. I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff to film under there as well. I mean, I like going under there. So he basically developed a camera. And when he wanted to go under there longer and find more cool stuff, he tried to find ways to invent more technology to make going underwater a lot easier. He would try to set records, and this is like very dangerous stuff too. Like, I like the fact that the documentary doesn't try to hide the fact that doing this kind of work is really dangerous. Like, one of his best friends actually like before he even gets to the documentary stuff, one of his best friends dies while trying to test out this underwater equipment, and it really shakes him. And then of course, as he goes along, keeps exploring, he starts, it's starting to make it a little bit more lucrative. It's interesting how the early days of Cousteau were a little bit like concerning when you look back on them. Because some of the stuff that he filmed was mostly for like jobs that he could find to like keep his, pardon the pun here, but to keep his boat afloat. So he would take on little jobs like, like kind of like filming, like he would film his boat for like films. He would do work for BP. He would film himself, like he would film his crew like killing animals for survival. And this is all stuff like this isn't like stuff to kind of like, look back and so much damn him, because like Cousteau has already done this. Cousteau has looked back on some of this footage and some of his work and realized, oh, it was probably pretty scummy working for BP. Like, I mean, I did it because like we needed the money, and we wanted to continue our underwater stuff. But yeah, in retrospect, probably wasn't a good idea, and it probably wasn't a good idea that we filmed ourselves like killing whales and like sea life too. Probably shouldn't have filmed that. But yeah, as he went on, he kept filming underwater and stuff on his boat. One of his earliest films that he made actually won a ton of awards for best documentary, even though, according to Cousteau, he didn't want it to be a documentary. It was just stuff he filmed. Like I don't know why you think it's a documentary. I just filmed cool stuff on the boat, but whatever. If you guys dig this, I'll do more of it. So then eventually we got Jacques Cousteau's like a little show. It's interesting because like it goes into a little bit about the production of the show, just enough, I think, where you're interested, where you realize that, oh, a lot of networks weren't really interested in showing this kind of show where like a bunch of people go underwater and explore cool stuff that hasn't been shown on television. I believe only one network was interested in it. And there's a little bit of like fascinating stuff along the way, like interviews where the people who were editing the footage didn't know who Jacques Cousteau was. So they just wrote like old man on the editing footage. They had no idea who he was at this point because, well, basically they didn't really have like a title for him. Like what do you call him? Like, I mean, he's not quite a scientist. He doesn't really have like a lot of accreditation for this. Like he's like, I mean, he's not quite like a captain. He doesn't have like much rank or like a expertise with boats. So what do we call him? Well, a lot of people just sort of call him Captain. Jacques Cousteau. Like not quite like captain. They called him like an explorer Cousteau, which makes sense. He went underwater, he explored like this whole new world, and just brought back his findings, saying, "Hey, here's what I found under the ocean. Isn't this stuff cool?" And it is cool. Like I've actually gone back and watched like some of his episodes, and they're fairly fascinating. They're very very fun to watch. It's easy to understand why it became such an international hit. Televisions all over the globe are watching it. And I think for a lot of people, the most fascinating thing about this documentary is going to be when they focus on the later years of his life, and he finds himself just kind of like dismayed by how the world has like treated the underwater world. And this is what led to kind of like the darker years of his underwater program, where he started highlighting the damage that's being done to the environment. And a lot of people thought that he was going too dark and being too somber with this. But the thing is, like, you gotta understand, this was something that Cousteau cared a lot about. And to, like, see it not being treated with respect, it just drove him a little mad. So he essentially became more of an activist at that point. He wanted to advocate for better treatment of the oceans and stuff like that, and fought for it. And he becomes a little bit more hopeful because of it. Like, it's interesting to see the shift, because it started with Jacques Cousteau being all about saying, like, oh, in the future, the underwater environment is so huge, so vast, so great to explore, that we're probably going to end up living underwater in the future. And as time progressed, he realized, we can't quite live under the water in the future if we can't fix basic problems on land in the future. So, but at the end of the film, it seems like in his later years, he was very hopeful about what the next generation could do, hoping that they'll have seen his work and pay attention to what he's said, and will want to do better with the underwater environment. So it's interesting. Like, Cousteau's like mindset initially went from just get money any way possible to keep this hobby afloat, to speculation about, oh, there's so much more we can do underwater, to realizing that, oh, we on land have to take care of the underwater world in our own way. So it's this very interesting progression to his character, and to see him have that kind of life that's so centered around caring about this environment, and essentially the world. It's edited brilliantly. It's mostly like audio interviews we get, but they're great because they're posed with a lot of great B-roll footage. At least like it seems like they shot some like B-roll footage for like the earlier days when he wasn't recording. And then of course, once his films and like his TV series came out and he was more in the news, there's a lot more of him through there. You get to hear a lot of Cousteau talk in his interviews, very fascinating stuff, like where he talks with, I believe there's like a talk he has with like Picasso, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of good interviews. I also like the fact that they tried to illuminate some of the stuff that Cousteau was seeing underwater. Like, there's a few great sequences where they just put bold colors over the footage of like sea life to kind of like highlight the allure that Jacques Cousteau saw there. I feel like there's like a little bit more that could be explored here. I feel like it's a little bit too quick, where like if you contemplate it on a little bit more, you could like kind of like see how Jacques Cousteau's work carries on a little bit more into the modern day. It feels like we're mostly just centering on his life, which I think is just within the time frame of his life, which is a good part like to center on. It's interesting as like a biography. I just felt like there was a little bit more to explore that isn't quite in the film. But on its own, it's a pretty good documentary. It gives you enough insight into what Jacques Cousteau's mission was, what he wanted to accomplish in the world and with his filmmaking, and how he was drawn to all this. So it's a very, very fascinating film.